If you have ever wondered what will truly bring you contentment, or if you've ever struggled to balance marriage, children, and your own dreams, or if you've ever thought about the legacy you want to leave behind, if so, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing The Satisfaction Café by Kathy Wang. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and on this channel, I review every kind of book I read, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, history, poetry, you name it, anything in between. And today's book came onto my radar because it was recommended on one of my many podcasts. I can't remember which one, but regardless, it intrigued me enough to pick it up, and now I'm going to pass my thoughts about it on to you. So let's start by taking a look at the author. Kathy Wang is a contemporary novelist who is known for her sharp, observant takes on family, culture, and modern life. She was born and raised in California. She is the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, and her writing often explores themes of identity, belonging, and the intersection between East and West. Her debut novel, Family Trust, came out in 2018. And it was compared to the works of Amy Tan and Kevin Kwan for its witty look at wealth, family dynamics, and inheritance. She followed that with Imposter Syndrome in 2021, a Silicon Valley espionage novel that mixed satire with a spy thriller, and it was named one of the best books of the year by NPR, Esquire, and the Washington Post. I haven't read any of those, but they all sound interesting. Of course, today we are taking a look at her newest novel, The Satisfaction Café, which continues her interest in complex characters and cultural tension, but it shifts toward a more introspective and multi-generational story. Critics have praised it for its emotional depth and for centering the life of the protagonist as a character who embodies resilience, compromise, and the search for connection. Kathy Wang currently lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her family. Of course, before we go any further, I do want to give a quick spoiler warning. I'll be talking about the characters and the plot of The Satisfaction Café in detail, including some major developments that happen later in the book. And if you prefer to go into this novel completely fresh, you might want to pause here, pick up the book, and then come back once you've read it. And for everyone else, let's get started. For starters, let's take a look at the main characters. The central figure of The Satisfaction Café is Joan Liang. She is an immigrant from Taiwan, comes to the United States as a student and ends up building an entire life here. Joan is resilient, pragmatic, and often conflicted, trying to balance her cultural background with her family responsibilities and her own sense of identity. Then there's Bill Lauder, who is a wealthy older American who becomes Joan's second husband, and she's actually going to be Bill's fourth wife. And of course, you will see how that plays out. And his presence introduces both a material security and an ongoing tension around questions of class, race, and family dynamics. And Joan and Bill raise two children together. They have their biological son, Jamie, and their adopted daughter, Lee. And through them, the novel explores generational differences and identity and belonging in a changing world. We also meet Bill's other children from previous marriages. These extended family members may not always take center stage, but they create the backdrop for much of the conflict that Joan faces. Questions of loyalty, culture, and who really belongs are all going to be key parts of this novel. And that, of course, is going to be the main figures in the cast. And with that in mind, let's take a look at the actual plot summary. As I've already stated, Satisfaction Café follows Joan Liang, who across the decades of her life, and it begins with her childhood in Taiwan, where she grows up in a family that is both loving, I'll say loving, but it is also certainly complicated. Her mother is deeply emotional and also prone to sudden outbursts, while her father maintains what appears to be a secret second household and is not a very reliable individual. And Joan excels academically, and though she isn't initially expected to go abroad, circumstances with her brother's failures in school pushes her to do so. So eventually she comes to the United States to study, find herself in California, living frugally in an attic while trying to carve out her place in the world. Her first marriage comes quickly during her student years, but it proves disastrous. Married to another student, the relationship is short-lived, ending in a shocking moment when Joan, in the heat of an argument, actually stabs him with a pair of calipers, which sets her on a very different path, including an estrangement from her family in Taiwan. Soon after, Joan meets and marries Bill Lauder, who is a wealthy, older American man who, as I said, has been married 3 times before, so this will actually be his 4th marriage. Their marriage does offer her stability, it does give her some financial security, and it is just a very different social world than the one that she knew before, but it does also bring new challenges. For example, Bill's wealth comes with baggage. You have skeptical relatives, you have stepchildren from his previous marriages, and a constant undercurrent of suspicion about Joan's motives. Is she truly a partner, or is she there for the money? And Joan endures subtle racism, a lot of class snobbery, and the difficulty of being perpetually seen as an outsider. Together, Joan and Bill raise 2 children. As I've already mentioned, you have Jamie, who is their biological son, and also he brings a lot of tension into the family because Bill was quite old at the time that he was born, and some of his relatives accused Joan of, doing this on purpose so that Bill would feel more financially committed, since of course this is his 4th marriage, and all of that is going to bring some tension into the marriage, but it does also bring a whole new level to what Joan is expected to do, and it completely changes the way that she's going to engage with the world. And then they have their adopted daughter, Lee, who is actually the daughter of Bill's youngest sister, Misty. Misty is full of, all sorts of wild adventures, and gets pregnant and has the child, and after just a couple months decides that she just can't handle this anymore and just leaves the kid. And you're going to find Joan willing to take her in and to help raise her. And of course, through the parenting journey, the novel explores all sorts of questions about generational contrast. You have Joan, who's shaped by her Taiwanese traditions of restraint and duty, and of course she now has to raise children in America where autonomy and self-expression are valued much more so. And this creates lots of moments of tension, but also lots of moments of deep reflection. Joan wants her children to thrive in their world, even if it sometimes comes into conflict with the way that she was raised. Bill actually is going to pass away when Joan is still relatively young, when the children are quite young too. And the one thing that she's adamant about before she even gets married, so in the prenuptial agreement, is that she would get the house. It was an incredibly expensive house, but that was the thing that she felt like gave her the best sense of stability and of course a sense of belonging. But it actually had been built by Bill's father, and so this is a beautiful, huge home, expensive home in California, and Bill's children, who felt quite entitled to it, and other relatives are quite angry at the fact that it gets left to Joan, his 4th wife. And so you are actually going to see the house lost in a fire that is set by Bill's son, so I guess technically Joan's stepson. And this is going to completely redefine what Joan is going to do, because she still has some access to resources, although not nearly as much as she did while Bill was still alive. She now also has lots of money from the insurance that is meant to be used to rebuild the house. And really what it does is it gives her a chance to just redefine her identity, especially as a widow. She has, lived much of her life in relation to others, her family in Taiwan, her first husband, of course, Bill, and her children. And now, with the passing of her husband and with the burning down of the house, she has to ask herself, what exactly does she want, and what does satisfaction look like? And so she will be extremely concerned for her children, who do get a fair amount of attention in the book, but also in defining what type of legacy she wants. Looking at her children, Jamie actually joins the military after 9/11, where he suffers considerably from injuries and PTSD, even after he does recover. Lee is actually going to struggle to figure out what she wants in life, and she has a complicated relationship with her biological mother, and she struggles to understand Joan, and likewise Joan also struggles to understand Lee, and so that's an ongoing issue. But she does have a close relationship with Joan, at least close enough that they spend a fair amount of time together. Lee is going to move back in with Joan when it becomes necessary, and they go on a trip to Japan, which leads her back to a concept that she had found herself thinking about a lot. And this is where she gets the idea to start something that she'd been dreaming of. And so instead of rebuilding the house that she was supposed to, instead she is going to open up the Satisfaction Café. And the Satisfaction Café is not a traditional restaurant. Instead of food being being the centerpiece, although there is food, it's usually a much smaller element of it, and it's actually not a very predictable menu. The cafe is designed as a space for connection. So patrons come not just to eat or drink, but to be listened to. So Joan hires hosts and hostesses and people whose job is simply to converse and to pay attention and to make visitors feel less lonely. The cafe becomes Joan's legacy and a response to what she sees as a world full of dissatisfaction, alienation, and disconnection. I will say that by the end of the novel, Joan has certainly had a life marked with resilience and adaptation, from her early years in Taiwan through difficult marriages and family struggles to finally creating her cafe. And her story asks the reader to think about what it means to build a meaningful life, hence the name of the cafe. And the cafe itself is not portrayed as a grand solution to all of human problems, but rather as a modest, thoughtful attempt to create connection in a world that so often overlooks it. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the major themes that you're going to find throughout this book. And I think that some of them are pretty obvious from the premise of the book. You've got all sorts of questions about cultural expectations, especially between Taiwan and the US. But I also think that there are others that are pretty front and center that you may not know until you get into the book. So I think that one of the strongest threads in Satisfaction Café is a question of loneliness and connection. Joan spends her life moving between different cultures, families, and roles, and she's constantly feeling like an outsider. And so the cafe that she eventually opens is a symbolic response to this. It's a place where being listened to is the main offering. The novel suggests that true satisfaction comes from human connection and not from wealth or success. And of course, another major theme is identity and belonging, which those can go hand in hand. I guess all these themes actually are going to be pretty closely connected. But I would say that as an immigrant from Taiwan who marries into an American family of privilege, Joan is constantly trying to navigate cultural contrast. She is judged and sometimes resented and always negotiating how much of her heritage to hold on to while helping her children grow up in a very different cultural environment. The book also explores class and privilege. Bill's wealth provides Joan with stability, but it also comes with baggage. The stepchildren who resent her, relatives who look down on her, and a constant undercurrent of suspicion. The author shows how privilege can insulate some people, while others, like Joan, have to fight to be recognized as more than just the outsider who married into money. And of course, there's also the theme of family and generational tension. Joan's children, Jamie and Lee, they each struggle in their own ways, with Jamie's trauma after serving in the military and Lee's search for identity as an adopted child. And their struggles highlight how satisfaction looks different for each generation and how love does not erase all conflicts. But it is a very powerful tool for helping to understand and to appreciate those that are trying to hear you and those that are trying to listen. I really enjoyed this book. It's certainly one of the novels that, well, I'll just say this. It covers the span of an entire life, which can be a bit unusual. And I think books that are, essentially fictional biographies, they take a certain kind of mindset. So be aware of that. It's not, particularly fast paced, and there isn't necessarily a straightforward central purpose to the plot. However, I do think that the premise and the through line of the book were thought provoking and engaging from start to finish. I did certainly find myself pulling for Joan. I didn't find myself necessarily judging Joan for her individual decisions because she makes, some very tough ones, but really more focusing on her attitude and her deep commitment to resilience. And that's what carried me through the book. And that's what left the strongest impression on me. The author really captures the endurance it takes to live through losses and to still create something meaningful. And of course, the Satisfaction Café is meant to represent that, but really it's a life well lived that is all going to be within the covers of this book. So who is this book for? It is for readers who enjoy character-driven stories that span decades and really dig into the inner life of one person. And if you like novels that explore cultural contrast or family dynamics or the immigrant experience in America, I certainly think that you will find a lot here to appreciate. It also is a great pick if you're interested in books that raise big questions about identity and resilience and legacy and what it means to live a satisfying life, hence the name. I would say that readers who don't need a fast pace but instead enjoy thoughtful, layered storytelling will likely connect with the Satisfaction Café. And finally, even though I have not read any of her other books based off their descriptions, I suspect that if you've enjoyed Kathy Wang's earlier novels like Family Trust or Imposter Syndrome, this feels like a natural next step in her work. Who is this not for? This book is probably not for readers who need a fast-moving plot or a clear central conflict to stay engaged. The Satisfaction Café unfolds slowly, and it's much more about Joan's journey and reflection than about dramatic twists or high action. It's also not the best fit if you prefer books that are focused novels with a single storyline, this is a book that meanders across decades. It covers a variety of marriages and family dramas and cultural contrasts and even the late life project of building a cafe. If you're not interested in that kind of expansive life-spanning narrative, then you might find this book a bit frustrating. Finally, if you're someone who prefers neat resolutions, this may not be the book for you. The ending offers meaning, but it's modest and it's reflective rather than sweeping or final. The novel's power is in the questions it leaves with you, and not in trying to tidy up every single thing into a neat bow. In the end, the Satisfaction Cafe addresses exactly what the title suggests. It's a place to find satisfaction, and that comes through decades of reflection, resolution, and incessant effort. Kathy Wang has created a story that feels both deeply personal and broadly relatable. If you're willing to slow down and follow Joan's journey across decades, I think that you'll find it as moving and as rewarding as I did. Of course, I would like to know what you guys thought about this book, if you read this book, or if you read any of the other authors' books, or if you have any thoughts on this type of writing, especially this novel that covers an entire person's life. Please let me know what you're thinking in the comments. And please, while you're here, go check out some of my other videos. And if there's a video that you enjoy, please share it, because the more people that know about my channel, the more videos I can make. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.